bad faith, and she said she had evidence of this through leaked Signal chats. Here's the twist. Attorney Miss Garrett made these Signal messages public, after redacting phone numbers and user IDs, of course. And honestly, if this really was a revenge plot, they probably wouldn't have wanted those chats unsealed in court. What the chats actually reveal is that while the lawsuit was being amended, the team decided to create a website to simply host the legal filings so the public could read them directly. Think about it this way. When Blake filed her CRD complaint, she handed it to the New York Times, who then published it online where anyone could read it like a lawsuit. This was basically the same move in reverse, just hosting the legal documents as PDFs. The Signal chats show attorney Summer Benson saying the timeline of events matched perfectly with the amended complaint, and that the website was just PDFs of court records. Another attorney, Brian Friedman, reassured the group that everything they were posting was covered by litigation privilege, meaning it wasn't defamatory. Jason Sunshine agreed, adding, "These are filed documents. I don't see any risk." Jamie Heath gave the final approval, clarifying, "We're not monetizing this. It's just a landing page to access already public documents." So basically, they weren't publishing secret information or trying to smear anyone. They just wanted a clean landing page where the public could see official court records. They even obsessed over accuracy. For example, Jamie demanded the PDFs be identical to the court filings, refusing to publish until glitches were fixed. That shows their focus was making sure nothing misleading went live. Eventually, TMZ picked it up, the site went viral, and traffic spiked. 11,000 active users in just 30 minutes, with over 820,000 downloads. Still, they kept the site minimal. Only the amended complaint and a timeline, avoiding flashy performance design. On the other side, rumors popped up about a subreddit called Bellin Files that some claim is tied to Blake's team, basically using Reddit to fight back in the same way they accused Wayfair of doing. So the irony here is pretty obvious. They also made it clear that everything happening was organic. Someone even asked, "Is there a way we can display those numbers on the side, kind of casually, almost like it's organic, just showing them climbing higher and higher?" The idea was that the numbers would tell the story on their own, without any push. They emphasized that the real numbers should be shown, but that the growth itself would look natural and convincing if left visible. At one point they wrote, "There have been over 100 live streams. It's a huge moneymaker for creators, and the sentiment is strongly in Justin Baldoni's favor. That's the real indicator. Either way, it generates revenue, but the support speaks for itself. Well done, family." Blake is trying to argue that this entire thing was part of a smear campaign. But in reality, all they did was release an amended complaint, a legitimate court filing, and post it on a public website. That made a legal record, something you'd normally have to pay to access, available for free to the public. And for the record, it's not illegal to post public court filings. In fact, it's no different from what Blake herself did when she handed her CRD complaint to the New York Times. So, if Blake is presenting this as proof of a smear campaign, her argument doesn't really hold up. Now, let's walk through another important point. In the same way Blake filed this complaint, she also filed a declaration. That declaration claimed, among other things, that Mr. Baldoni verbally abused people. The filing made it clear that the identity of one particular individual who disclosed past verbal abuse by Justin Baldoni should remain sealed. The request was to keep their identity hidden in order to protect their well-being and maintain the confidentiality of sensitive personal details. Exhibit 1 of this filing was produced and marked confidential by Blake Lively under the court's protective order. It included personal and identifying details about this individual, enough to warrant continued sealing of the document. This is somewhat unusual. Typically, If someone files an affidavit in court, their identity becomes part of the public record. In this case, it seems the person only agreed to file if anonymity was guaranteed. The redacted portions of the declaration contain details that, if revealed, could expose their identity. Naturally, a declaration is filed by a real person, and their identity would normally be known. But here, they don't want this individual targeted or harassed by the press or by social media users who closely follow the case. The court has already acknowledged how unique and media-driven this case is. And what's almost ironic is that the declaration itself has already received widespread media coverage. The filing even notes that if the declarant's name or identifying details were exposed, it would trigger even more coverage and a frenzy online. In fact, the coverage already out there includes attempts to unmask the declarant, while at the same time calling the declaration nothing more than PR and lies. The argument from Blake's side is that there's no public interest in exposing this individual to 6 months of harassment and online attacks before trial, even if it's not even clear whether this person will actually testify. They argue that whatever minimal public interest exists in knowing the declarant's identity is outweighed by the much stronger need to protect the individual's privacy and well-being. From my perspective, I think the judge will probably agree to keep this sealed. But here's the thing. If you don't want to be part of a public lawsuit, you don't have to file an affidavit. You don't even need to submit a document like this. To me, the fact that this person wanted anonymity suggests that they only agreed to sign because they were told their identity wouldn't be revealed. And that raises questions about credibility. If you can't stand behind your statement publicly, how strong is your testimony really? The judge has already ruled in favor of keeping the Signal chats partially sealed, ensuring that nobody's phone numbers or usernames were exposed. But he hasn't yet issued a ruling on whether Blake's request to seal this declaration and protect the individual's identity will be granted. Meanwhile, in another case, Jones versus Baldoni v. Tag v. Basically everyone, Stephanie Jones is pushing for portions of testimony from Bonna Koslow and Katie Cassis to be unsealed. Apparently, those depositions contain information about who the Stephanie Jones Leaks website was actually created for. And interestingly, it turns out that person isn't even part of this lawsuit. It's not Baldoni, it's not Tag, and it's not Jed Abel. It turns out this whole thing actually traces back to another high-profile client who supposedly proposed the idea of putting the website out there. Stephanie Jones is now pushing to have that information unsealed. Specifically, she wants the attorney's eyes only designation lifted so that her lawyers can tell her exactly who this client was. In other words, she wants to know who asked for this website to be created or who is behind the lawsuit idea. The identity of that person has been identified, but it hasn't been shared with Stephanie Jones herself because her deposition testimony was marked as attorney's eyes only. Both Wayfair and Casey's attorneys argue that this information should remain under seal. From Wayfair's perspective, this is simply a third-party allegation. It's someone speculating about what a proposed client might have wanted. That doesn't make it actual evidence. On top of that, Case admitted that she personally wrote the copy for the website. She testified under oath that everything she wrote was true, and that much of it was based on her own direct experiences working with Stephanie Jones. When it comes to Case and Koslow, their objection to unsealing the identity of this person is clear. It's about protecting a proposed client. Revealing who it is could stir up unnecessary speculation, harassment, and even public hysteria towards someone who isn't actually being sued at the moment. They admitted there's a chance this person could face a lawsuit later on, but for now, they're not a defendant in any case. And what's undeniable is that whoever instructed them to create this website, it wasn't Justin Baldoni. It wasn't Wayfair Studios. It wasn't Jamie Heath. It was somebody else entirely. Stephanie Jones, of course, worked with plenty of high-profile clients. Her list included Jeff Bezos, Lauren Sanchez, The Rock, Tom Brady, you name it. She managed to upset more than just Wayfair Studios. So, it's no surprise that this could connect back to any number of major names. What seems clear is that yes, Tag was behind proposing the website, and it was supposedly created for a client. But that client wasn't Baldoni. If you think about the timeline, the site went live in May of 2024, a time when Baldoni wasn't even having issues with Stephanie Jones. He wasn't dealing with her then, which makes it unlikely this was ever about him. Honestly, it looks more like she went after the wrong defendants in this lawsuit. Now, Tag admits they wrote the copy, but here's the crux. Jones would still need to prove that what they wrote was false and defamatory. And the fundamental truth in defamation law is that truth is the ultimate defense. If the statements are true, you don't have a defamation case. Their lawyers also argued that unsealing this information would essentially create a trial within a trial, sparking unnecessary hysteria, speculation, and distractions. They further claim they don't trust that Jones would keep it confidential, even if it remained sealed, and fear she'd push it into the public sphere. Their position is that the identity should only ever be revealed if and when they actually decide to sue this person. Until then, it stays sealed. What the judge will rule on this, no one really knows. But what struck me most was the fact that Jones has repeatedly accused Justin of being behind the website, and yet, the evidence points in the opposite direction. Another interesting detail from all these leaked documents is how hands-off Justin really is with his business. He's technically the founder of Wayfair Studios and listed as a managing member, but in practice, Jamie Heath, the CEO, seems to be the one actually running the show. Justin is rarely, if ever, seen in the Signal chats discussing the public release of these documents. In fact, even the decision to hire crisis management wasn't his. It was Jamie's call. It's unusual because most business owners are heavily involved in the key decisions, especially when their reputation is on the line. But in Justin's case, it seems like Jamie is the one making the real strategic moves, while Justin operates more as the public face of the company rather than the driver of its day-to-day decisions. Now, I don't want to give the impression that Justin isn't doing any business at all or that he's completely absent from the company. That's not the case. But what we can clearly see in the communications and documents made available so far is that he simply hasn't been very actively involved in the decision-making, especially when it comes to the specific actions taken after this lawsuit was filed. His role appears far more limited, and that hands-off approach is unusual compared to what you'd expect from a company founder. That said, I also don't think this necessarily translates into a clear win for Blake either. At the end of the day, from my perspective, none of this proves anything concrete. It creates a lot of speculation, but speculation alone isn't evidence. Right now, Blake and his legal team are still required to formally respond and raise their objections. And they've already made it clear that they are fully prepared to escalate this matter. Attorneys are lined up, and if necessary, they're ready to appeal the judge's decision. So, the legal battle is far from over. In fact, the longer this drags out, the more complicated and messy it's likely to become for Blake. And that brings us to the big question: what do you think about this new development? Do you believe the sealed information should be revealed, or do you think keeping it confidential is the right move given the potential fallout? I'd really love to hear your thoughts, so share them with me in the comments section below. Also, if you found this breakdown helpful or insightful, please don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up. It really helps support the channel. And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you'll never miss any of my updates, deep dives, or new videos as soon as they go live. Thanks so much for sticking around and watching until the end. I truly appreciate all of you. Take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye, besties. Now, I don't want to give the impression that Justin isn't doing any business at all, or that he's completely absent from the company. That's not the case. But what we can clearly see in the communications and documents made available so far is that he simply hasn't been very actively involved in the decision-making, especially when it comes to the specific actions taken after this lawsuit was filed. His role appears far more limited, and that hands-off approach is unusual compared to what you'd expect from a company founder. That said, I also don't think this necessarily translates into a clear win for Blake either. At the end of the day, from my perspective, none of this proves anything concrete. It creates a lot of speculation, but speculation alone isn't evidence. Right now, Blake and his legal team are still required to formally respond and raise their objections. And they've already made it clear that they are fully prepared to escalate this matter. Attorneys are lined up, and if necessary, they're ready to appeal the judge's decision. So, the legal battle is far from over. In fact, the longer this drags out, the more complicated and messy it's likely to become for Blake. And that brings us to the big question: what do you think about this new development? Do you believe the sealed information should be revealed, or do you think keeping it confidential is the right move given the potential fallout? I'd really love to hear your thoughts, so share